Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Hampton from the University of Kent. I'm here with Hannah, and we're going to be talking a bit about human geography at Kent, our new BSc program, which we're very excited about. As of this autumn, I'm going to be the program convener, which means I'm in charge and running the program, which we are really thrilled that we're going to be offering this at the University of Kent in the School of Anthropology and Conservation. And Hannah, one of my colleagues, of our students, is going to talk a little bit later on about her experience of being a student at Kent and sharing some of her thoughts and her ideas about what it's like to actually be here at the University of Kent. So we have this Human Geography BSc, Bachelor of Science, not a Bachelor of Arts, and I'd like to share a few thoughts about our programme. I want to bring up a slide, should we get this all to work? If I need to hit the right buttons. We've got a slide in a moment which is going to talk about, which really shows how humans are interacting with our environment. I just need to stop that and get this to come up. Right, that should now work. No, it's still not. Okay, try that again. There we go. Okay, so what I like about this slide is the fact that we've got this poor bird, I think it's a gannet, all tangled up with seaweed, and beyond the seaweed there's all this netting that hopefully you can see the picture on your screens. And one of the things that kind of drives our school, because we're a school of anthropology and conservation, is trying to understand how humans interact with the environment, what it is that we do as people, and the way that impacts on our amazing, precious planet. And that underpins really our human geography program, that we're embedded in a school of conservation and anthropology where there's a long history, many years of understanding our environment, conservation of endangered species and so forth, but also the human side. So geography is sitting in that kind of space. Okay, so I'm hoping you can see on your screens some mugshots of my dear colleagues in our department. I'm not going to talk you through all their specialisms, but you can see it's a range of different things that we do. You can see from the infographic that human geography covers a wide range of different areas, and within our school we've got a lot of interest in different areas that we research, and that feeds into our teaching. In Kent, what we talk about is research-led teaching, and that means that as researchers, as academics, we're all actively working on our areas and then bringing that into our teaching. So I'm a development geographer, and that means I have a particular interest in trying to understand how poverty is worked out in the developing world. How do we lift people out of poverty? And so I'm trying to understand that in the context of using tourism particularly as a vehicle for poverty alleviation. Some of my colleagues are working on all sorts of interesting things. So you can see from this slide that should be coming up, you can see some of the things that colleagues are working on. We've got a particular interest in spatial relationships and using GIS technologies to understand our human footprint on the planet. We've got colleagues working on ecosystem services and trying to understand the complexity of our ecosystem and humans in part of that. We've got work going on supply chain and farming. How do you get a sense of the relationship between what goes on the farm and the if you like, the farm to fork sense, and what that does to the environment. We work obviously on protected areas and conservation. And my own area, tourism impact. What does tourism do if you're the host community? What effect does it have on the environment, the built environment, the natural environment? And so as a research-led university, research-led department, all myself and my colleagues, we're constantly working on our research. So for example, during the Easter vacation, when our students were away from the university, I was overseas and I managed to fit in some field work trying to understand how tourism has impacted a small island in the tropics. And that then will feed into later lectures. I'll be able to use my material I gathered in the field for case study work to show how tourism impacts and makes a difference to the lives of islanders who previously grew coconuts and were fishing, inshore fishing, artisanal fisheries. Okay, a couple of other things I'd like to kind of bring to the webinar at the moment is about what we call practical learning experiences. And at Kent, we're very much into helping our students learn by doing, practical learning. And on our geography program, our human geography program, one of the things that we're very pleased about is the development of all our field work. And this goes right through from level 1 right through to the final year on our program. So for example, in the first year, we've got a whole range of UK-based field trips when we'll be taking our students out and about in Kent and the southeast, a bit further afield for day trip type field work. And then we also have a trip to Brussels in that first year. And then between second and third year, we have a further afield, a residential field trip to Greece, where we'll be looking at land use and how some of the Greek islands have gone from predominantly agricultural land use through to tourism and other forms of tertiary industry. Okay, very briefly, just to go through some of our modules before I hand over to my colleague Hannah. In our first year, we've basically developed a program where majority of the first year is stage 1, as we call it, is a lack of choice at the moment, because the idea is that there's a core program which everybody does to get everyone up to the same stage. Now, that's whether you've done A-level geography or the equivalent, or you haven't actually studied geography. You may have noticed we don't insist on geography as a entry requirement. We like that and we do prefer it, but we don't absolutely insist on it. So the idea of our first year is that there's a common program which brings everybody up to the same point with this range of modules on people and place, environmental change, patterns and process, and sustainability, of course, not just at the moment. This is a long-term concern. And academic skills, which really introduces you to the step up at university rather than your previous studies at college or school. And then beyond that, we have 2 spaces in our program in the first year, where we call the optional modules, worth about 30 credits. And these are the recommended: green planets and animals, people and plants. But because Kent has a very wide sense of other modules that you're allowed to take, students could take other modules in even other bits of the department or the rest of the university, subject to timetabling. So that's stage 1, and there's all the details are available on our website and in our various printed materials. Stage 2 and 3, we have certain core modules again. We really get a chance for you to understand GIS and spatial analysis. We talk about fieldwork, and methods, which really prepares you for your final year projects. We take you a little bit into the history and philosophy of geography as a discipline, more on environmental management. And then at stage 3, we have a couple of critical modules as well, compulsory modules as well, critical geopolitics and geographies of tourism development. And what this means is you've kind of got a core of modules that you must take, and then beyond that you have optional modules to kind of build your program, so that, for example, if you found that GIS and spatial analysis was more your thing, then there's time to go into that little bit more detail and do your dissertation using GIS type techniques. If you're more interested in, say, the politics of geography, you could then, as well as taking the compulsory module of critical geopolitics, you could follow that up again with your dissertation, and possibly even taking wild modules from the rest of the university, because we've got a very strong politics department. So, and there's a research project that I've just been mentioning. And just a final slide on this. I want to just talk you through briefly the optional modules. You can see from on the screen, there's a great range of optional modules within the school. We have a strength in trying to understand climate change and how it impacts on endangered species and other forms of life. We have an overseas field trip in our between stages 2 and 3, and you can see a range of interesting modules that will attract our students' attention. But also, as I said, there's a whole range of what we call wild modules at Kent, and these are modules that you can take subject to the timetable, where you could do a language, you could do a course in, I don't know, in Chinese studies or whatever, and it gives students a real chance to experiment and broaden your learning. Okay, so quite a few things there which I've talked about, but what I'd like to do now is to bring in Hannah as one of our students, and to ask her to talk a little bit more about her experience at Kent. So Hannah, maybe you could start the ball rolling by, I could ask you about what do you like about being here?
One of the main reasons I chose Kent was because of the school and the flexibility there is within the school to take different modules, as you were saying. So for me that was quite important, because I could, for example, take ecology modules, which really interested me, but I could also take more spatial-based modules, which is obviously also really important if you want to sort of try and work with people in the future and make a difference. And also, again, wild modules. So, for example, this year I did an environmental politics module. So I just really like the fact that I could sort of shape my course to my interests. So that was a really big draw for me. Additionally, I also knew I wanted to do a year in industry as part of my course, which isn't offered everywhere. So that was a big factor. And I think it's really important to sort of gain fieldwork experience, or sort of some sort of job experience before you graduate, to give you sort of that confidence once you do graduate, and also maybe try something that you're maybe unsure about as a career choice, you know, because then you're only doing it for maximum a year. So if you find out you really don't like it, it's not.
Sure, which hopefully won't happen too much.
Yeah.
Maybe I could ask you a bit more about the wild modules. Now, obviously at Kent we've got quite a choice, but you said you did environmental politics. Now, was that in a different department?
Yes, so that was in the sociology department actually. In the past I've also taken a few of their modules. I think there's an environmental policy one. There's also in the law school there's an environmental law module, for example, as well. So yeah.
And what's the advantage then of going to another school for something like those modules? What did you get out of that?
But it's nice because there's different lecturers as well, so sometimes you can have a different perspective on things. And it's also interesting just to see how students from different schools work in different ways. And it just just gives that extra aspect or angle, if you like.
That's really good. I think it's one of the strengths of Kent, isn't it, that students can do that. So you also said a bit about your year in industry. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so for my year in industry, I went to Austria, so you do have the option to do it abroad if you want. You don't have to, you can also stay in the UK. But yeah, I really wanted to try working abroad because I know that's something that I'd like to do in the future. So it's sort of a good way to try living in a new culture and environment. And I went to somewhere called the Wolf Science Centre, which is working with wolves. And it was actually more behavioural, so not so strictly related to my degree, but something that I've always been interested in. And it was a good way to sort of try something new, and I really loved it. So,
sounds great. Great. So talk us through. So you're interested in wolves. Now, obviously, that's a very specialist area. But in terms of how the department was able to support you, did you have to try and find it on your own, or how did that work of actually getting into going to spend a year abroad on a really fabulous project like your wolves project? How did that work?
So if you choose to do the year in professional practice, it's sort of up to you in terms to find a placement. And that sort of has advantages in the fact that you can sort of do whatever you want within reason, of course. And it also gives you that experience to go through the whole sort of job application process and finding a job like you would after you graduate. Of course, lecturers or tutors and stuff will help you, and if you need help writing a cover letter or a CV, they'll of course look over it for you. And also your lecturers and maybe other students within the school, like PhD students, might have connections. So if you know one of your lecturers, for example, works in tourism, and you want to do something, you could go to them and say, this is what I'm really interested in. Do you have any suggestions of good organisations? But it is really sort of down to you to find a placement that you like.
Yeah, I think we're quite lucky, aren't we? Because we have a very lively seminar series, and I know sometimes students have gone and talked to some of our guest lecturers who've come in about their areas of the particular organisation they work in, and have got contacts that way. And one of the things people watching may not realise is that our students can actually go anywhere in the world, so it's not just limited to UK or Europe. That providing the placement is something we're happy with, and we can sign it off. The students aren't just going to be making the coffee and being the person to go and do things. That they actually had a proper professional year. We can support students all over the world, which is great. So, okay. What else? What else can we tell people? Tell us a bit about your experience of living. What's it like to live in Canterbury?
Yeah, well, actually, that's another sort of reason why I chose Kent aside from the course. Is I really like Canterbury, and the campus itself is really nice. So it's a campus university, so everything's sort of within its own community, so to speak. But we're also a 20-minute walk away from town, and I've always sort of lived sort of in the middle of nowhere, so Canterbury is actually sort of quite a big place for me. But it's nice that it has everything, but you can still sort of walk everywhere, which is really nice, and it still has plenty of pubs and nightlife opportunities, and it's just a really nice student town, because there's also 2 other universities, so you're also not just meeting Kent students, you're also meeting other students, which can be fun.
Very good. Very good. And it's quite an environmental campus, isn't it? It's surprising how much we've got going on the campus to do with the environment. This morning when I came into work, went past the big poster board that talks about the wildflower meadows, which is really great. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good things about the campus. Maybe you could talk a bit about also about what it's like to actually study here, because people watching may be thinking, well, I've done school or college. What for you maybe was were there any differences of when you first came here? I mean, it's a while now, certainly been here a while, and different experience, but can you remember when you first came here? Was it, what sort of differences are there? And was there some help from Kent to help you sort of ease into being a university student?
Yeah, so I guess it is quite a big step from, going to college for A-levels. And the first year you live on campus, which is really helpful because you're sort of really immersed in that sort of campus life, and all your flatmates and you as well. So you're all in the same boat, which is really nice, and you can sort of, go for each other for help. But there's also plenty of other departments within the university that are specific just to help students.
Yeah.
There's student support and wellbeing, which is not in, and there's also plenty of other stuff. So it's not just academic help, but also any other help. And also, I personally have a learning disability, so I was a bit worried that maybe I'd struggle at university, but they've also been really, really helpful with that. So I've had lots of support in terms of that. So that was really great.
That's really great.
Yeah,
and I think that's really important, isn't it? That a university like Kent's been around for a long time, and there are lots of mechanisms and people around to help, whether it's with learning challenges or stepping up to university or other things that can impact on studying. And that's one of the things that, as an established university, we've got a wide range of things to help our students, from the chaplaincy if there's issues there. Funnily enough, we have the city's mosque is on campus, so for students who inquiries who are of a Muslim faith, then that's actually on site. It's easy, you can get halal food. For people of no faith or whatever, there's plenty of things to do on the campus. There's meditation spaces, so the spiritual side, or if people are interested in wholeness and wellness, that's all available. Got a range of counselling services and health services, so there's a lot of support, isn't there, for students and staff on campus. Maybe we could think a bit about some of the questions and things, and often students and inquirers often ask about assessment. Maybe that's something we can chat a bit about as well, because obviously from my point of view I get to mark the assessments, to grade the essays, to grade the exams and so forth, but maybe you could share a bit about your experience of what sort of types of assessment have you had over your time with us?
So it sort of depends on which modules you take. So some of them are more sort of coursework based, so you can get modules which are 100% coursework, which if you don't like exams, it's great. I personally am not very good at exams, so that's really nice, that because unlike A-levels where it all comes down to that 2-hour exam, it's really nice because you can express your knowledge in a variety of different ways, and the coursework isn't necessarily all just long essays. There's also sort of more creative options like presentations, making videos, that kind of stuff. So it sort of really depends on the module. But yeah, there's a variety of different ways you can be assessed, which is helpful.
Yeah, well, that's been done deliberately. What we do when we design a course is we sit down as a course team and think about how do we get the balance between formal exams and tests and things which help you to try and show your knowledge in a particular time frame or under certain conditions, alongside other ways of showing your learning, whether it's through writing an essay or things you're talking about, or assess presentation. So as a university and as a department, one of the things we do is we try and think very hard about this when we're putting our program together. So for human geography, we thought very hard about getting the balance between assessment and exams, which we'd still do at Kent, being a traditional university, but also this other range of other things, including presentations. And that kind of leads often to what you may come across when you're watching this, the idea of so-called transferable skills, where we think very hard about what it is we can offer our students when they come to Kent, that the skills that are transferred into the workforce afterwards, into the workplace, things such as learning to speak confidently in public and all these sort of things that aren't just the standard essay skills, but moving beyond into thinking about how can I become more of a critical thinker, how can I analyse, get information, and then bring that to bear on a particular problem and answer that in a critical sort of way. So, okay, maybe another question that we sometimes get asked as with people thinking about coming to university is about how many hours a week is involved in a course. And I know it does depend, but say in your experience, on an average week in term time, roughly how many hours would you have in teaching?
So usually per module, and roughly you do 4 module term, you have an hour of lectures at least, and then at least 1 hour of seminar. So that's sort of direct, engaged with the teachers and the lecturers. And then of course on top of that, we also should do the sort of extra reading and your own effort and input into the module. And then aside from that, there's also other ways you can get involved. There's like academic societies within the school, so you can get involved in that way and sort of go to extra lectures, because there are a lot of sort of guest lecturers that come in and regularly do talks. So that's another way to sort of additionally engage. So yeah, and then of course if you do field trips, that's
Absolutely.
which is fine as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, so one of the questions we often get asked is how many hours a week is the teaching? And that's slightly difficult to answer in a way because, you, as Hannah's saying, you've got your formal teaching, and then beyond that, got a lot of other things. And if you want to do well in your final grades, then there's a lot of reading behind. We often say that the lecture is really meant to give the outline of the subject area, and then it is up to the students to go in, read if they want to do really well, and then go to put the work in. So the rough guidance is that for every hour of lecturing, there should be about 3 or 4 hours of preparation and reading to go with that. So when people see headline figures, it can be a bit, it's not always an accurate level on how many hours of teaching you get, because there's all the rest of it. University is meant to be reading around. If you want to do well, you've really got to read and really get into your topic. And every time we do lectures, we'll give reading lists, we give suggested references online or hard copy, whatever, so that there's always that material to sort of undergird your learning. Okay, maybe we could think also a bit about field trips. So you mentioned field trips. So tell us about one of your field trips.
So one of the big highlights for me was a field trip to Borneo, which is part of the tropical ecology module. Which is an optional module, and it was 2.5 weeks in the Bornean jungle.
Fantastic.
It was really hot and lots of mosquitoes, but it was fantastic.
Leeches?
I didn't see any, thankfully.
Good. That's all right then.
Yeah.
Leeches.
But it was, we saw wild orangutans, which was just stunning. And yeah, I think it's just a really great way to sort of get some hand-on field experience. We also do one sort of more locally as well. So you don't have to go to Borneo if you don't want to. Yeah, so yeah, there's quite a few field trip opportunities. Again, depends on the module.
Indeed. And one of the things I love as a lecturer is actually leading field trips and actually working with my students in the outdoors and actually trying to show how the things that we're studying in the classroom, in the lecture room, relate to real change. So for human geography, what is it that people do in the environment when we build settlements, about when industrialization comes in different industries and agricultural shapes and forms, what that does to the environment. And actually you can't beat standing there and looking and getting a sense of how something has changed, whether it's farmland that used to be deciduous forest, whether it's fishing areas that are now turning into tourism resorts, whatever it is. And for me as a lecturer, I get a real enjoyment. I love taking my students to the field and trying to explain and to work with them to understand the landscape and what we've done to it. So you're absolutely right. I mean, you can't beat going to do field work. And something like geography, you can't do a geography degree without field work, very much like your own background, So, okay, so field work. And one of the things we should perhaps mention is that the school does have some financial help available. So if applicants are worried about how you can afford field trips, then the UK ones are all covered anyhow. We have access to transport. Further afield, there is departmental budget available to help pay for some of the costs of international field trips, so that we wouldn't want anyone to be excluded because financially it might be a stretch to go on our field trips. And obviously they are a lot of fun, but they're also work as well. So we do work our students on the field trips. It's not just going off having a nice time at someone else's expense. It is actually a work experience, but you can't beat it. When I was previously working in tourism, one of my great memories is taking my students to Greece and standing with them in the Acropolis and thinking about, well, how has this place changed? It's an amazing piece of global architecture, UNESCO World Heritage Site. And you can't beat standing somewhere and thinking about it and then getting that experience sort of embedded into that local culture and local environment, sense of place. Okay, so we've got question sometimes comes in about what to do to prepare for coming to university. And we sometimes get asked about, are there things we can do to actually help us get ready for university from students who've signed up to come to Kent? And there is material available. We've got all sorts of resources, and we will be recommending certain books. So I think that really is a kind of case by case. So depending on the program, in this case, Human Geography, please get in touch with us and we can send you some recommended reading. We can point towards some of the great textbooks and resources we're going to be using on the Human Geography course. And there is material out there. I think what I would say though as a lecturer is the more reading you can do, the better. So between now and starting your program with us at Kent, then the more thinking and reading you can do about the topic, the better. So that's keeping abreast of the quality newspapers, quality websites, to get a sense of some of the things that are happening. At the moment, there are so many things going on about the environment, the whole extinction arguments of climate change, the world heating up, many things which are impacting on our human activities are impacting on our amazing planet. So there's plenty you can do to prepare even without necessarily formal reading, just kind of getting into the thinking behind environments, so that when you come, you can kind of hit the ground running. Okay, so I think we're gradually getting through our questions. I think that's most of the questions I've got on my list. Do you have any other things we ought to talk about?
There's also lots of other, aside from the academic side, there's also lots of other societies, which I would encourage students to get involved in. I think there's over like 200 different societies, so there's guaranteed to have something you'll be interested in. There's like a tea drinking society, there's a Quidditch society, so those are in addition to the academic societies, and that's also a great way to meet students that aren't just on your course. So yeah, I've made a lot of good friends from different societies. I personally did a sailing society, for example.
Oh, excellent.
Which is in Whitstable, which is really nice.
So what kind of boats you sail?
Just small sort of dinghies.
So lasers and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, very good. It's a bit cold in the water.
Yeah, in the winter.
Do you have a wetsuit or anything?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's a bit nippy in the winter, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, there's archery. I did archery as well. Yeah, there's plenty to get involved in. Travel society. Yeah. Where we've been to trips. We went
very good. Where did you go?
Barcelona. We've also done ones in the UK. We went to Brighton just for a day.
Yeah, very good.
So there's definitely plenty of other stuff to get involved in within university life that isn't necessarily academic as well.
Yeah, we're very well located, aren't we? The fact that we're only about an hour from Gatwick, hour and a half from Heathrow, 35 minutes from the tunnel and from Dover. We're in a really brilliant location if you do want to travel in the holidays, in the long weekends, etc. There are possibilities on there to get out and about from Kent. We're very well located, and basically an hour or so up to London on the fast train. So it's a very, very good location, as well as being a beautiful city. And I don't know if we've mentioned already so far that our graduation ceremonies are in Canterbury Cathedral, which is this astonishing piece of architecture, regardless of whether you are in the faith position. It's an amazing building, and we are lucky enough to have our university graduation in Canterbury Cathedral. So parents and supporters can actually see our students getting their Kent degree in this astonishing 1,000-year-old building. It really is quite an impressive thing. So one of the things as an academic, I quite like going to graduation, see my students get their degrees in this incredible place. It's well worth looking at. In fact, Canterbury's a pretty cool place to go to. Lots of things to see and do, and a lot to do in Kent as well. So okay, so I think that's most of our questions. So I think we'll probably call it a halt there, but thank you for watching us, and hopefully we may see some of you at the University of Kent on our BSc in Human Geography in the future. Goodbye.
Bye.